The evening rush had just begun at Melrose Bistro, a cozy but upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. The air buzzed with conversations, the clinking of silverware against plates, and the occasional bursts of laughter from well-dressed diners. At the center of it all was her, Jasmine Carter, balancing 3 plates in one hand while pouring a glass of wine with the other. She had been working here for nearly 2 years, and in that time she had mastered the art of grace under pressure. Tonight was no different. The restaurant was packed, the demands endless, but she handled it all with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to survive in a world that rarely showed her kindness. Then he walked in, a man in a crisp navy blue suit, a Rolex glinting under the warm restaurant lights. He had the air of someone who expected the world to revolve around him, and as he took his seat in Jasmine's section, she braced herself. She had seen his type before, demanding, dismissive, the kind of customer who saw people like her as nothing more than service providers, invisible until needed. Still, she approached his table with a warm smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Melrose Bistro. Can I start you off with something to drink?" He didn't bother looking up from his phone. Instead, he waved a hand dismissively. "Water, no ice." Jasmine nodded, jotting it down on her notepad. She turned to leave when his voice cut through the noise. "Actually, wait." She turned back. His eyes were on her now, scanning her name tag. "Jasmine, right." He paused, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Make sure it's bottled, none of that tap garbage." Jasmine bit back the irritation rising in her throat. Keep it professional. She had dealt with worse. "Of course, sir." As the night went on, he lived up to her expectations, complaining about the bread being too cold, snapping his fingers for service, making snide remarks about how people these days don't know what real work is. And then the breaking point. Jasmine placed his entree in front of him, a beautifully plated filet mignon, exactly as he had ordered. But before she could step away, he scoffed loudly. "What the hell is this?" Jasmine blinked, confused. "Is something wrong with your meal, sir?" He jabbed at the steak with his fork, shaking his head. "This is overcooked. I asked for medium rare, not well done. Do you people even listen?" A few heads turned. Jasmine felt the heat creeping up her neck. "Stay calm." "I'm so sorry about that. Let me fix this for you." She reached for the plate, but before she could take it, he pushed it toward her with just enough force that the sauce splattered onto her apron. A few gasps sounded from nearby tables. Jasmine's fingers curled into her palm. She had dealt with difficult customers before. She had endured bad days, rude comments, and impossible demands. But this, the way he sneered at her like she was beneath him, it was the final straw. "Breathe, Jasmine. Don't lose your job over this," she forced a smile. "I'll have the kitchen prepare another one right away." But he wasn't done. "Don't bother, I've lost my appetite. With service like this, I wouldn't be surprised if this place shut down soon." A sharp laugh escaped him, as if he found his own words amusing. Jasmine's grip tightened around the plate. She could feel the frustration, the exhaustion, the weight of being treated like she was less for so long. And then her manager approached. She already knew what was coming before he even opened his mouth. "Jasmine, can I see you in the back?" Her heart sank, not again. With one last glance at the man who had just humiliated her, Jasmine set the plate down and followed her manager toward the back. She had given this job her all. She had sacrificed, worked overtime, smiled through gritted teeth. And yet, the moment a customer like him complained, she was the one who had to answer for it. As the kitchen door swung shut behind her, she clenched her fists. This wasn't fair, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just going to take it. He jabbed at the steak with his fork, shaking his head. "This is overcooked. I asked for medium rare, not well done." "Do you people even listen?" A few heads turned. Jasmine felt the heat creeping up her neck. "Stay calm." "I'm so sorry about that. Let me fix this for you." She reached for the plate, but before she could take it, he pushed it toward her with just enough force that the sauce splattered onto her apron. A few gasps sounded from nearby tables. Jasmine's fingers curled into her palm. She had dealt with difficult customers before. She had endured bad days, rude comments, and impossible demands. But this, the way he sneered at her like she was beneath him, it was the final straw. "Breathe, Jasmine. Don't lose your job over this." She forced a smile. "I'll have the kitchen prepare another one right away." But he wasn't done. "Don't bother. I've lost my appetite. With service like this, I wouldn't be surprised if this place shut down soon." A sharp laugh escaped him, as if he found his own words amusing. Jasmine's grip tightened around the plate. She could feel the frustration, the exhaustion, the weight of being treated like she was less for so long. And then her manager approached. She already knew what was coming before he even opened his mouth. "Jasmine, can I see you in the back?" Her heart sank. Not again. With one last glance at the man who had just humiliated her, Jasmine set the plate down and followed her manager toward the back. She had given this job her all. She had sacrificed, worked overtime, smiled through gritted teeth. And yet the moment a customer like him complained, she was the one who had to answer for it. As the kitchen door swung shut behind her, she clenched her fists. This wasn't fair, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just going to take it. Jasmine Carter was done being silent, and what she did next would leave the entire restaurant stunned. The dinner rush at Melrose Bistro had turned the restaurant into a controlled storm of clinking silverware, hurried footsteps, and hushed conversations. Waiters weaved between tables with practiced precision, balancing trays filled with delicate plates of steak and seafood. At the heart of the chaos was Jasmine Carter. She moved swiftly, gracefully, a tray balanced on one hand, a pen tucked behind her ear. Her uniform, black slacks and a crisp white button-down, was spotless, though she knew by the end of the night it would bear the battle scars of spilled coffee and sauce stains. Jasmine had worked at Melrose Bistro for nearly 2 years. It wasn't her dream job, not by a long shot. But it paid the bills, kept her afloat. And on the good nights, when customers weren't snapping their fingers at her or treating her like she was invisible, she didn't mind it. Tonight, however, wasn't shaping up to be a good night. She could feel the tension in her shoulders as she approached table 6. The man sitting there was the kind of customer she had learned to recognize on sight. Expensive suit, a watch that cost more than her rent, the air of someone who thought the world revolved around him. She had dealt with his type before, demanding, condescending, impossible to please. But Jasmine was nothing if not professional. She put on her best smile, her voice warm and polite. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Melrose Bistro. Can I start you off with something to drink?" He barely acknowledged her, eyes glued to his phone. Without looking up, he muttered, "Water." "No ice." She nodded, scribbling it down. "Stay professional, Jasmine." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." But as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Actually, wait." She glanced back, meeting his eyes for the first time. They were cold, calculating. "Make sure it's bottled. None of that tap garbage." Jasmine bit the inside of her cheek. She had served customers like him 100 times before, and she knew the script by heart. Smile, Nod. Keep your head down. But something about tonight felt different. She could already sense that this customer, the way he tapped his fingers impatiently, the way his gaze flickered over her like she was nothing, was going to be a problem. And she was right. Because by the end of the night, this man would push Jasmine past her breaking point, and what she did next would leave the entire restaurant stunned. The dinner rush had reached its peak, and Jasmine was moving as fast as she could, juggling multiple tables while keeping her composure. Table 6, however, remained her biggest problem. The man, the rude, entitled customer, had already sent his bottled water back twice, too warm, too cold. Then when his steak arrived, he barely looked at it before waving her over with an impatient flick of his wrist. "Are you serious?" he scoffed, jabbing a fork at the medium rare fillet. "I asked for medium. This is disgusting. Take it back." Jasmine's jaw tightened. She knew for a fact he had ordered medium rare. She had written it down, repeated it back to him, and even confirmed it with the kitchen. But arguing with a customer, especially this type of customer, was a losing game. She took a slow breath, forced a smile. "Of course, sir. I'll have the kitchen fix it right away." She turned to take the plate when he suddenly muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. "Unbelievable. Can't even get a simple order right. This is why people like you don't belong in places like this." Jasmine froze. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the plate. "People like you?" She had heard it before, in different variations. Sometimes it was subtle, a certain look, a change in tone. Other times, like now, it was blatant. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw it in his eyes. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to snap, to prove whatever ugly stereotype he had built in his mind. And for a moment, she almost did. But instead, she swallowed the anger burning in her throat and walked away. Raising the steaks back in the kitchen, she set the plate down with more force than necessary. "Breathe, Jasmine, breathe!" Her co-worker, Luis, glanced over from the grill. "Table 6 again?" She nodded, pressing her fingers against her temples. "He's impossible. He just wants to make my life hell." Luis sighed. "You want me to take over?" Jasmine shook her head. "Number I can handle it." She had dealt with worse. She just had to get through this shift. But when she returned, with his corrected steak, the man's smug expression made her stomach twist. He cut into the meat, chewing slowly, deliberately. Then, with a dramatic sigh, he dropped the fork onto his plate. "Still wrong." Jasmine's hands clenched at her sides. "Sir, this is exactly how you ordered it." "Oh, so now you're arguing with me?" His voice was louder now, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "I'm paying good money for this meal, and I expect it to be right. But clearly, you people have no idea what customer service means." The words "you people" rang in Jasmine's ears like a siren. She felt her entire body go rigid, heat rising to her face. Then, before she could stop herself, she spoke. "Maybe if you weren't so rude, your food wouldn't taste so bitter." The restaurant fell silent. For a moment, the man just stared at her, stunned. Then his face twisted with fury. "Excuse me? Did you just talk back to a customer?" Jasmine realized what she had done, but it was too late to take it back. Before she could even think of an apology, the restaurant manager, Mr. Collins, was already making his way over, his expression tight with warning. "Jasmine, in my office. Now." Her stomach dropped. She knew what was coming, and within the next 5 minutes, her entire life was about to change. Jasmine sat across from Mr. Collins in the cramped office, the air thick with tension. "Jasmine," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "You know we can't tolerate that kind of behavior here." She swallowed hard. "I know, but I don't care what he said." His voice was sharp, final. "You're a great waitress. But talking back to a customer like that? It's unacceptable. He's demanding that you be fired. Jasmine felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. So, that's it? Just like that? He hesitated, then nodded. I have no choice. I'm sorry, Jasmine. The words felt like a slap. She had given everything to this job, showing up on time, working double shifts, handling rude customers with a forced smile. And yet, all it took was one complaint from a privileged, entitled man for her to be thrown out like she was nothing. When she walked out of the restaurant, apron balled up in her hands, the humiliation burned deeper than the cold night air. Her first instinct was to call her mother, but she stopped herself. She didn't want to hear the disappointment in her voice. Instead, she pulled out her phone and saw a text from Luis. Luis. That was BS. You okay? Jasmine stared at the screen, then typed back. Not really. A second later, another text came through. Luis. Meet me at Rosie's diner? My treat. She hesitated, then sighed. Might as well. At Rosie's diner, Jasmine stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, staring out the window. You gonna keep doing that, or are you actually gonna drink it? Luis teased. She let out a humorless laugh. Maybe I'm trying to read my future in it. Luis leaned forward. And what do you see? Jasmine exhaled. Nothing. That's the problem? He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. A flyer. What's this? She asked. Job posting. A new restaurant is opening downtown. They're hiring. Jasmine stared at it. The pay was better, the location was nicer, but what if the same thing happens again? She muttered. What if I mess up? What if? Jasmine, Luis cut her off gently. You didn't mess up. You stood up for yourself. And maybe that wasn't what they wanted, but that doesn't mean it was wrong. She looked at him, searching his face for doubt. There was none. For the first time that night, she felt something other than anger or humiliation. Hope. Jasmine decided to take the risk and apply for the new restaurant job. The hiring manager, Ms. Green, was a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense attitude. You seem qualified, she said, flipping through Jasmine's resume. But why did you leave your last job? Jasmine hesitated, then chose honesty. I got fired because I stood up to a rude customer. Ms. Green's eyebrows lifted slightly. And would you do it again? Jasmine swallowed. The safe answer was no, but something in Ms. Green's expression told her she didn't want the safe answer. If it meant defending myself or someone else? Yes. Ms. Green studied her for a moment. Then, to Jasmine's shock, she smiled. Good. She slid a contract across the table. Welcome aboard. Jasmine blinked. Wait, seriously? We don't tolerate disrespect here, Ms. Green said simply. From customers or employees. I need people who can hold their own and still deliver great service. Think you can do that? A slow smile spread across Jasmine's face. Absolutely. Things were finally looking up. Jasmine was adjusting to her new job, growing more confident in herself, but life had a way of knocking her down just when she got back on her feet. One night, as she was closing up, she checked her phone and froze. A video had been posted online. Entitled, Waitress has a meltdown after a customer complains. Her stomach twisted as she clicked the link. It was him, the rude customer. He had recorded their confrontation, carefully editing out his insults to make her look like the aggressor. And now the comments were flooding in. Typical. Always playing the victim. She deserved to get fired. This is why some people shouldn't be in customer service. Jasmine's hands trembled. Just when she thought she had escaped, her past had followed her. Jasmine sat frozen, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. The video of her so-called meltdown had already racked up thousands of views, with comments pouring in by the second. The humiliation she had felt when she was fired came rushing back, sharper than ever. She scrolled through the comments, her stomach twisting. Entitled much? No wonder she got fired. I wouldn't want someone like her serving me either. Jasmine's hands shook with frustration. This wasn't fair. The video had been edited to make her look bad, cutting out the insults, the condescension, the way that man had treated her like she was nothing. A new message popped up. Luis. Hey, you see the video? She exhaled shakily. Yeah, Luis, this is wrong. We can fight this. Jasmine hesitated. She wanted to fight back. She wanted to set the record straight. But the more she scrolled through the comments, the more hopeless it felt. Even if she spoke up, would anyone believe her? She turned off her phone, feeling sick. The next day at work, Jasmine tried to act normal, but she could feel the shift. The other waitstaff whispered in hushed tones when they thought she wasn't listening. Some of them had clearly seen the video. By the time her shift ended, Ms. Green called her into the office. "Close the door," she said. Jasmine's heart pounded. "Please don't fire me." Ms. Green folded her hands on the desk. "I saw the video." Jasmine swallowed hard, bracing herself for the worst. "And?" she asked quietly. "And I also saw the security footage from your old job." Jasmine's head snapped up. "One of my friends manages that restaurant," Ms. Green continued. "I asked for the full video." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. "I saw everything," Ms. Green said. "The way that man spoke to you. The way he pushed you until you finally defended yourself." Jasmine's hands clenched into fists. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Ms. Green leaned back in her chair. "That depends on you," she said. "I can back you up. Release the full footage and show people the truth. But this is your call. If we do this, it won't be easy. The internet loves tearing people down, but it rarely apologizes when it's wrong." Jasmine felt a lump in her throat. She had spent so much of her life trying to keep her head down, avoid making waves. But this wasn't just about her anymore. She thought about all the other workers like her, waitresses, cashiers, retail employees, who had to endure harassment and disrespect just to keep a paycheck. She had a choice: stay silent and let the world believe the lie, or fight back. Jasmine exhaled. Jasmine sat at the small desk in Ms. Green's office, staring at the computer screen. The unedited security footage was queued up, ready to go live. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. "Once we post this, there's no going back," Ms. Green reminded her. "Are you sure?" Jasmine swallowed hard. She thought about the online comments, the humiliation, the way people had judged her without knowing the full story. But she also thought about the countless workers who had been in her position, powerless, voiceless. She clicked upload. Within minutes, the internet exploded. The truth was out. The full video showed the wealthy customer mocking her, hurling insults, and goading her into a reaction. It showed his smug smirk as he recorded only the part where she finally snapped. Social media went into a frenzy. "I knew something was off about that first video. She deserves an apology. That man needs to be banned from every restaurant in the city." But not everyone was on her side. She still lost her temper, unprofessional. Two wrongs don't make a right. She's just playing the victim for sympathy. The negativity still stung, but this time Jasmine had something she didn't before: support. News outlets picked up the story. People started sharing their own experiences of being mistreated in the service industry. A movement began to grow, and then the customer, the man who had humiliated her, released a statement. Jasmine, Luis, and Ms. Green sat together in the office, watching the press conference on a laptop. The man stood behind a podium, flanked by his lawyer. His face was tight with irritation, like he had been forced into this. "I regret that the situation escalated the way it did," he said, voice stiff. "It was never my intention to harm anyone's career." Jasmine clenched her fists. No real apology. No acknowledgement of what he had done. Reporters threw questions at him. Why did you edit the video to make her look bad? Do you think she should get her job back? Do you take responsibility for the backlash she faced? He refused to answer. That was when Jasmine's phone buzzed. An email. She opened it and gasped. A job offer, not just any job, a high-end restaurant in the city owned by a well-respected black chef. The message was simple. "We saw what happened. We believe in second chances. Let's talk." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. She had fought back, and this time she had won. Jasmine stood in front of the restaurant where it had all begun, the place where she had been humiliated, fired, and nearly lost herself. She hadn't been back since that day. Now things were different. Her phone buzzed, a news notification. Wealthy diner who got Waitress, fired caught in another public meltdown, backlash grows. She clicked the link. The article detailed how the same man had berated another server at a different restaurant, but this time people were recording the full encounter. The backlash was immediate. His company distanced itself from him. Some venues quietly blacklisted him. His reputation, built on money and privilege, was crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. Jasmine didn't smile at his downfall. She had learned that revenge wasn't the answer. Growth was. She took a deep breath and stepped inside the restaurant, but this time as a customer. A few old co-workers glanced her way, whispering. The new manager, a woman she didn't recognize, looked up. "Jasmine?" "Just here for lunch," Jasmine said with a small smile. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Let me get you a good table." As Jasmine sat down, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She wasn't the same person who had been fired here. She wasn't afraid of what people thought. She wasn't looking for revenge. She had fought her battle and won, not because she destroyed anyone, but because she had found something greater, her voice, her confidence, and a future she was building on her own terms. Jasmine sat by the window, stirring her coffee, watching the world move outside. The restaurant bustled around her, but for the first time in a long time, she felt still, at peace. Across the table, her best friend Maya studied her. "So, how does it feel being back?" Jasmine took a slow breath. "Different. I thought I'd feel angry, like I had something to prove. But I don't. I've moved on." Maya grinned. "That's growth. A year ago, you would have stormed in here, demanding justice." Jasmine laughed. "Yeah, I would have. But justice doesn't always come the way you expect. Sometimes it's just knowing you're better than the moment that tried to break you." The new manager passed by, offering a small, uncertain smile. Jasmine nodded back. There was no resentment left, no bitterness. Outside, the city pulsed with life, opportunities, new beginnings. She had plans, big ones, and for the first time, she truly believed in them. Maya nudged her. "So what's next?" Jasmine smiled, lifting her coffee. "Everything." And with that, she took a sip, looking forward, not back.